Hello and welcome everybody to another photo critique. Today I've got a little bit of a different photo critique because it's also going to be kind of an editing video, because the 9 photos from Adrian, I've actually imported them into Lightroom so I can show you the adjustments that I would make to them, which of course is a lot more interesting to watch for everyone, and I think you can also learn a lot more in general. So if you submit via Flickr, you can allow the download somewhere in the settings, and that definitely makes it a lot more, I think, concise and a lot more informative, because once again I can actually show you the editing on the pictures. So we're here with the first picture in Lightroom, and I do like the overall look and style. It's very vibrant while not being overdone, and I definitely like that you have the background out of focus, because otherwise it would probably be a little bit too cluttered. Now the framing, I mean, the overall picture is nothing spectacular, but it does work with the path to the right and with this, I don't even know what it is, kind of tree stump with the moss covered. It all works together very well. The only thing that I might do to it is just grab an adjustment brush and kind of raise the exposure on some of these dark parts, just slightly. And then also you can try to grab a graduated filter, kind of go into the minus exposure with an entire side of the picture, and then grab another plus exposure graduated filter for the other side. Now, it's definitely not a big difference, but it might be just a little bit more interesting towards the right. But overall, I do like the picture. The next one right here. This is a really great picture, and very interesting as well. I love the fact that you went with a very low contrast kind of look, because it really amplifies this mysterious, almost left alone, weathered kind of mood. So the only thing that I would do, you know what, I do kind of have my own editing style in mind here, but first of all I'm just gonna kind of show you some improvements that I would do to the picture while still preserving your kind of editing style. So I would definitely crop down a little bit of the sky, because there's just not too much going on up there, and that way you have even more attention on the actual boat and all of the foreground elements, which kind of makes everything a bit more compact and more interesting. Then I would also bring up the highlights here, just so you have a bit more of a differentiation, because the sky looks a little bit muffled how it was. But if I would have to edit this for myself, once again this is completely my own style, so just look at some of the elements and maybe you like it, maybe you don't. But I would actually go for kind of a crazy look here. I would decrease the overall exposure even more. I would go into the minus contrast even more, and then I would add a lot of vignetting with the adjustment brush just over the corners right here, definitely over the left, and make everything a lot darker. And maybe I'm even gonna grab another one with even more minus exposure and just kind of make this left part extremely dark. Yeah, just something like that. And after that, I would actually bring up the whites just a tiny bit to make everything even more kind of bright, more dynamic is the better way to say it. And then, let me see. I would actually not do too much to it, maybe a little bit into the minus clarity as well. But that's pretty much it. Afterwards, I would just go into the dodge and burning and add a little bit of plus exposure. Actually quite a bit of plus exposure, maybe also mix that with a little bit of clarity. So you also have some differentiation going on within the clarity of your picture. And, you know, just add a little bit of dodge and burning, not too much, actually pretty much just plus exposure. And maybe even over the sky, because there's really so much you can do here. You know what, I'm actually gonna add this very big rail filter and kind of go into the plus exposure for the entire mid part of this picture. And there's really a lot more that you could do to it. I'm gonna keep it relatively short and simple here, but just once again add a little bit more plus exposure even over the dark parts can really help to give your whole picture, you know, a little bit of a more interesting look. And other than that, I think that's pretty much all I'm gonna do to it. So let's just quickly see, here is before, here is after, and I definitely went completely into the opposite direction, but maybe you actually like some aspects of it. At the end, up to you, but I would definitely crop the picture and bring up the highlights. So then the next picture, this is very interesting. You kind of went for a little bit of a low clarity and low contrast look here as well, although I don't think it works that well. But in terms of the overall picture, I do like the composition, definitely love that you didn't cut off anything. And it's once again very simplistic, but it does work. So what I would do here is just increase the overall contrast and, well, a little bit of plus clarity as well. And then also grab an adjustment brush, add even more contrast on just the sky, and even go a little bit into the minus exposure. Also could add some clarity, but yeah, I don't want to over edit the sky. That's pretty much all I would do to it. You could of course once again add even more dodge and burning and make some parts a little bit brighter, and maybe even make an entire side of this tower kind of bright and make the other side even darker, so you get even more differentiation within the lighting from light to dark. So here would be your before, here the after. Up to you if you like this kind of style better or if you think it's overdone, but I would definitely increase the contrast at very least. Then let's go to the fourth picture, I believe, and this is very interesting. I absolutely love the overall mood and the overall cloud structure, very interesting. And I also think it works really well together with this tree stump, with this leading a line into the picture, works really well. However, I would cut down on some of the blue tones, and honestly, once again, I'm gonna go into just my own editing style here, which is gonna look very different to the picture, how it looks right now. But I would go a lot into the minus exposure, increase the highlights, and also increase some of the white tones. Now, as you can see, there's still way too much blues that it really looks unnatural. But I'm gonna fix that in a second. First of all, I might even want to bring down the shadows, and in terms of the highlights, I don't think there's really anything that's needed to be done here. So in terms of the overall look, once again, already a lot more dark, but it's definitely way too much blue, so I'm gonna go here into the HSL tool, go to saturation, and just bring down the blues by a lot. And you know what, I might even bring up the luminance in the blues so it looks even more dramatic. It might be a little bit too much for your taste, but I'm just giving you some examples of what you could make the picture look like. Other than that, I would definitely grab an adjustment brush, go into the minus exposure, and just add a lot of vignetting, especially in the corners and in the bottom here. And because the picture now looks really too dark, I would maybe even consider to go a little bit into the minus contrast, so the whole dark shadows aren't as pronounced. And I would definitely add some dodge and burning as well, mainly with plus exposure, but feel free to also play around with the minus exposure. So definitely some in the water here, maybe just a little one on this rock, just to give that some additional interest as well. And then I would definitely play around with this tree stump, maybe even add some negative exposure here, and go a bit into the plus exposure with just a very long kind of radial filter, just something like that. And there's really a ton that you could do here. So let me just quickly see. Honestly, I think that's pretty much all I would do to it. If this was my own edit, maybe a little bit more vignetting, but other than that, I do like this look. So once again, if I show you the before and after, it's a completely different picture, but maybe, in my opinion, it works actually better with the overall stormy clouds and with this very almost mysterious kind of look, especially with the tree stump with all of these branches. But at very least, get rid of some of these blue tones. Once again, you can just go to the HSL tool and that does a really good job of it. But I do like the overall picture, looks very interesting, and I think it's a very simplistic composition, but it does work. Then to yet another picture, and this is a sunset photo. This is really interesting. So I love the fact that you have such an interesting and such an prominent foreground element with these rocks, but I also love that you have the entire sun on the horizon, and with the reflection it really creates a path through the picture from both ways, which I think work really well. The only thing that I might do is kind of increase some of the exposure with the sky. It just looked a little bit too dark for me. But other than that, I don't really know what to do here. You could of course try to add some vignetting on the very bottom to create a little bit more interest and some more complexification in the lighting. But other than that, I really don't think there's terribly too much to do. So really love the picture, very simplistic, but it does work. And definitely really interesting in the colors. Actually, there is something that just came to mind, so let me grab a graduated filter for the right and kind of go into the warm tones even more. Just a little bit because it's already pretty warm, but maybe the tint a bit more towards the magenta, and then grab another graduated filter over the other side. And here just go into the blue tones. So that way you really have a nice differentiation from blue to kind of warm tones, and even some of the yellows, of course, of the sun. And I do think that overall makes the picture even more interesting, but it's not a huge deal, so you can play around with it, but it's definitely not necessary. But I do like it a little bit better from before to after, just seems a bit more complex. Then let's go on, and we've got a panoramic shot. Definitely too much magenta. Even though it's at sunset and it's colorful, I would go a bit more into the green tones and just get rid of some of this magenta. And also, in terms of the overall composition, there's just not too much going on. I do like the fact that you didn't cut off any of these trees, and that you at least have this path towards the left. But even with that, there's really not too much interest. You could add some interest with plus exposure rail filters, but even then, I still don't think the picture is up to too much. I do think if this picture would have a very interesting foreground element, it might make up for it. But how it is right now, there's just not too much going on here. Then this is an absolutely beautiful photo. Here everything works, the color is very beautiful while not being overdone, and I absolutely love the lighting. Very, very interesting, and I really wouldn't do anything to this picture. Definitely my favorite photo of you so far, just because you have such a nice play from dark to light tones. And you have so many different colors, the long exposure look on the water as well as on the clouds. It just works all together. Of course, the sky up here isn't necessarily too interesting, so you could try to crop it down, but then it might just become a bit too tight and doesn't have enough breathing room. But yeah, great picture overall. The cropping, you could try out, once again, different kind of crops. But other than that, great editing, and I absolutely love the picture. Then let's go on to the next, and I believe second last picture, a black and white photo, obviously. And I do like the composition here as well. You really managed to get a very interesting composition while not cluttering the picture, which is a thing that a lot of people have problems with. But you really just concentrate on the most important scenes and the most important things in your picture and really bring it across in a very non-cluttered way. So I definitely do like that. I also love the exposure time, especially with the structures in the clouds. It makes a lot of interest, it creates a lot of interest. But at the same time, I think you could go even farther. So if I would have to edit this picture, I would probably go a bit more into the minus exposure, maybe even in the minus contrast, and then add a graduated filter over the pretty much entire right-ish part of the picture, and go even farther down into the minus exposure, and then add another graduated filter in parallel and go a little bit into the plus exposure. So that way you create even more differentiation within the exposure throughout the picture. And if you want to go even further, you could of course bring up the highlights in the tonal curve and even bring up the whites, but I'm not quite sure if that really works or if it just overpowers the picture. Maybe just a little bit of the highlights, but not all the way. So then you could of course once again add even more dodge and burning. Even minus exposure I think has definitely a place in this photo, with mostly the foreground here, and you could of course also mix that with some clarity and really introduce a lot more differentiation in the picture. I would, however, if you make the right part so dark, I would definitely increase the exposure with this tower, so it doesn't look as left away. But at the end, I really do like the picture. It's very simplistic, but it does work, and I might even go even further with the minus exposure on the bottom. So here towards the right would be my edit, and towards the left, of course, your edit. At the end, it's a, not too big of a difference, just a little bit darker as an overall look. And at the end, stick with whatever you like best. I think the picture is really good regardless. Then let's go on to the last and final picture, and I do like this. So in your composition, once again, you don't have too much going on, which I absolutely love. I do think, however, that the left side of this photo is definitely the strongest part of the picture, because there's just so much going on, and you of course have this little pathway leading you into the picture, to this house, to the tree, and the right. I might even consider to crop the photo. Let's just see how that looks. I do think it works. Now, it definitely also works like this. It adds another element to the photo, but at the same time, it kind of takes away some of the attention of the things towards the left. But at the end, stick with whatever you like best. In terms of the editing, I would, I do have an idea here as well on how I would edit the picture. But I would definitely just add a little bit more minus exposure here in the sky, because you've added so much vignetting on the bottom left and the bottom right. The sky just looks a little bit too bright for me, and I would also bring down some of the exposure in these very bright clouds here. I do think these two adjustments make the whole picture a bit more even, while still having a lot of differentiation from the dark to the bright parts. I just don't think that making stuff very bright like this really works in this sort of picture. You can of course also add some plus exposure just on some of this shoreline and also in the water, and also of course on this path. And yeah, I do think this picture is a really strong one. I think even my second favorite of yours. And from before to after, maybe I just want to add a little bit more vibrance after all of the editing. But I do think it's a very strong picture, very simplistic once again, but a really, really nice mood. So to the editing that I would do if this was my picture, I might even consider going into black and white. I mean, I like the blues actually, but I think black and white might even work better with this very mysterious and kind of misty overall look. So let me just try out a bunch of different things. I would go crazily into the minus clarity, so it looks even more hazy and even more misty. And then I would even go into the minus exposure overall, decrease the contrast by a little bit, and even grab an adjustment brush to kind of get rid of some of this very heavy vignetting on the bottom right. So let me think. I would definitely add even more plus exposure filters on this path right here. And I might even play around with some minus exposure filters here towards the trees. And in black and white, I might just increase the whites by a little bit, and that is pretty much all that I would do to the picture. Maybe add a bit more vignetting towards the left, but that is pretty much it. So once again, a very significant difference. At the end, I can of course not tell you do that. I just think it's a valuable option, and especially the minus clarity has a very significant impact and I do think it works better for the overall kind of look, even if you stick within color here, going a little bit into a minus clarity might actually work, even though you can't really go as far as you could go with the black and white picture. So I hope you could at least find some of these tips and techniques helpful. Once again, this is just my personal opinion, and you should just look at it as kind of a second input and a second option rather than what you should do. You're of course the artist, and you should only do what you think works best and looks the best on your pictures. But overall, I think you have a really interesting style, a very moody, a very kind of mysterious style that I really like. Your framing and your composition skills are really great. You really managed to make a very simplistic picture with just the core element, so you don't clutter anything up. And honestly, I do like the composition on any picture, except kind of for this one, because it's just not too much going on. But even here, it's not like bad or anything. So my favorite 3 pictures from you were definitely this one. This is just so strong, so interesting, and everything just works together. Same with this photo right here. And also these rocks are really well edited. So thank you very much for watching. By the way, all of you guys who have still not gotten your critique and have submitted pictures, I've got all of them on a list. There's really just a lot of people there kind of waiting for now, but I'm definitely gonna get to them. So thank you once again very much for watching. As always, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I hope you have a great day.